The scraping woke me at 7 a.m., clean and surgical metal teasing the tumblers of my garage lock. I knew that sound from a lifetime ago, precision, not panic. When the door rolled up there, she was Victoria Stone, our HOA president, clutching a master key kit like it came with her title. She stepped into my garage with the confidence of a landlord, chin-high mouth, already forming the threat she'd practiced in the mirror. And then she froze because the surprise waiting for her wasn't a widower too tired to fight it, was my son Detective David Morgan badge-out body cam on, and a federal warrant ready to snap shut like a bear trap. I'm John Morgan, 60 years old. Disabled vet widower. My wife Maria died 18 months ago, heart failure, the kind the doctors couched in words like stress and complications. The house still smells like her lavender soap and the garage. The garage is where I hide when the silence gets too loud. Her quilting stuff is on the shelves, holiday boxes labeled in her perfect handwriting, and right in the center, a mahogany jewelry box with brass corners and a German combo lock she never taught me to open. Said she'd show me when the time was right. Funny how grief makes time meaningless and deadlines suddenly holy. Victoria came 2 months after the funeral, gliding into the HOA like a vulture who knew exactly which windows showed the weakest light. She brought casseroles. I didn't ask for elder care resources. I didn't need a smile that never touched her eyes. And every visit she found a reason to pass through my garage to drift toward that box to run a finger along the brass and say vaguely, "Sometimes widowers I'd correct. Overlook valuables that need proper documentation." The way she stared at the lock wasn't admiration. It was reconnaissance. The first citation hit my mailbox on HOA letterhead garage storage violation section 4.2.3. Secure estate items to community standard. Compliance, 30 days. I read the bylaws that night, all 200 pages. There was no section 4.2.3. I read them again because when you live alone with a ghost, you start to gaslight yourself. Maybe I missed it. Maybe grief bent the lines on the page. Nope, it wasn't there. She made it up. Then I stumbled on a neighborhood forum, post-helpful documentation they called it. High-res photos of my wife's jewelry box. Macro shots of the lock side angles under different light-even measurements. Who does that for insurance? The shutter clicks. I'd heard during Victoria's visits suddenly made sense. She wasn't documenting. She was studying. A day later she arrived with Rebecca Wilson, HOA secretary. A nervy woman who kept her eyes on the clipboard like looking me in the face might get her fired. Victoria moved through my garage like she owned it. Tape measure snapping numbers called out Rebecca, scribbling 12 inches by 8 by 6. Original brass hardware. German mechanism, special assessment required. She said assessment the way a thief says alibi. Then she leaned close as if confiding a favor. Insurance deadlines are firm, John. We have less than 30 days before protections lapse. Federal documentation is often time-sensitive. Federal documentation. In my garage. For a jewelry box I bought as an anniversary gift 30 years ago. I smiled and nodded the way you do when a stranger mentions your mother's maiden name unprompted. The next wave hit harder, a letter that looked like IRS language sharp as a bayonet. Allegations of unreported income tied to antique holdings, a specific reference to documents of financial value within a secured box. Someone filed a complaint. Someone knew what they were doing. I spent the afternoon talking to a voicemail forest and a human who told me to hire a lawyer. My blood pressure cuff beeped like a car alarm. That night someone tried the lock. Not a teenager with a crowbar, not a drunk with a bad idea. Professionals. I saw two shadows through the blinds, one working the tumblers, one posted at the corner scanning like he'd memorized the SOP. When I hit the porch lights and shouted, they withdrew fast, clean like a rehearsal. In the morning, I found a chemical burn etched into the lock. Face, acid work, precise, controlled. You don't learn that on YouTube. On my garage door in red spray paint the color of accusation someone had written, welfare fraud. Underneath, in blue, different hand. Check the box. MM. 2 messages, 2 factions, 1 war. I didn't know I was in. I went to Maria's desk. I hadn't touched it since the funeral felt like betrayal, but my hands moved on their own. Behind quilting magazines, I found notebooks. My wife, the gentle quilter who grew tomatoes and organized bake sales, had been running an investigation. Not a hunch. A case. Vendor, overbilling, forced sale patterns, shell companies buying foreclosed homes for pennies. Names circled. Dates underlined. Pattern repeats every administration. Regional coordinator rotates. Evidence secured where J will find when ready. J for John. For me. I called David. I almost hung up after the second ring because what do you say? "Hey son, the HOA's trying to assassinate a jewelry box," he answered in the voice I remember from his academy days, clipped and clear. I talked fast and breathless about acid scars and fake bylaws and graffiti and Maria's notebooks. He didn't tell me to calm down. He told me to turn on the front and back lights, step away from the box, keep the phone on speaker. "Dad," he said, and for the first time in a year, I heard my name where Sir used to be. This isn't HOA drama. This is evidence destruction and conspiracy. I'm coming over. He arrived with a partner, Detective Smith, eyes like X-rays, and a man in a windbreaker who introduced himself with the kind of calm that makes liars confess Special Agent Harris, FBI, financial crimes. On my workbench, he laid out what he already knew. Suspicious property sales across 3 counties. Elderly targets. Recycled shell companies. "Your wife contacted our unit multiple times," he said. "She documented well. We lacked a custodian for her evidence. He meant she died, the case stalled, the wolves got bolder. Standing there under the fluorescent flicker, I felt smaller than I've ever felt. Even smaller than the day I signed the hospice papers. I'd failed Maria in life by missing what she was fighting. I'd failed her in death by ignoring the noise in my own garage. "What if I can't do this?" I said. I didn't mean the plan. I meant to be brave, to be a witness, to be the husband she thought I was. David put a hand on my shoulder, awkward and solid. "Then borrow my spine for a while," he said. "But listen, we don't cowboy this. We build it clean." They applied for an anticipatory warrant with Judge Williams, hard to get, harder to screw up. They installed cameras so small they vanished into the chaos of screws and thread spools. They explained chain of custody like I'd never heard the phrase in a dozen true crime shows. I nodded, pretended to understand, tried not to throw up. At the courthouse the next day, Victoria looked like NPR in a navy blazer, competent, cultured, catastrophically fake. She used phrases like emergency inspection authority and compliance under federal mandate, and the judge, bored enough to stamp a teddy bear, almost let it slide. In the hallway, Rebecca found me. She leaned in, eyes darting. "I've been documenting her for 6 months. She tried to force my family into bankruptcy with made-up violations. My mom has Alzheimer's. She threatened adult protective services. Rebecca showed me her phone recordings, screenshots, timestamps, a mosaic of small crimes that add up to a racket. Your wife's name is in shredded emails I recovered. Victoria has been terrified of that box for months." By the time I got home, Victoria had left a message, one of those messages where friendly is a knife in a smile. "John, federal estate regulations require immediate documentation tonight. I can bring a specialist cash purchase at market rate." She pushed so hard she stopped selling the lie. She wasn't chasing antiques, she was racing a deadline. That night alone in the garage, I sat with the box. I hadn't opened it because I couldn't, but also I think because opening it would make this real. Maria's last words in the hospital, rigid with morphine and meaning, came back. "Our love story holds every important number." I said them out loud, a prayer disguised as math. September 14th, 1985, the night I asked her to coffee at the community center after watching her stitch a star quilt. March 7th, 1962. Her birthday, 09-14-85, 03-07-62. I turned the dial. The lock surrendered with a soft mechanical sigh. Inside, a USB drive cradled in foam. and a tiny screen that blinked and came alive with her face smaller than life, bigger than breath. "My darling, John." Maria said, her voice steady as stitching. "If you're watching this, she targeted us successfully. I documented everything. Give this to Special Agent Harris." I lowered myself onto the stool, set the USB down like it might shatter the moment, and texted David Box open. USB secured, not touching anything else. The reply came from the darkness of my own garage, made me jump like a cat. Perfect Dad. My son and an entire team were already in position, quiet as forgiveness. The plan was simple because it had to be. Victoria would come at 7 like she promised in a certified letter so full of arrogance you could wring it out. She'd exercise emergency access, which means break into my garage with professional tools. The cameras would see. The warrant would cover. The cuffs would close. My job was to stand where I was told and not let rage turn me stupid. Dawn showed up gray and grainy, the kind of light that makes every mistake look permanent. I stood by the workbench, hands up like a tourist at a museum of my own life. Right on time, heels clicked up the driveway. Her voice carried before she did. "John Morgan, this is a mandatory estate compliance inspection under federal authorization. Open immediately, or I will exercise emergency access protocols under court order." She waited exactly long enough to pretend manners, then the toolkit came out. No hairpins, no bent paper clips. Real gear that costs money you don't spend unless you know exactly what you're doing. The lock clicked. The door rose. She stepped in with triumph already blooming on her face. "John, we can make this simple." She stopped because someone moved behind the shelves. David stepped into the light like a judgment. Badge high, camera. Red dot blinking. "Ma'am," he said, and if he called her ma'am any calmer, the air would have frozen. "You're under arrest for criminal trespass, attempted burglary, conspiracy obstruction of a federal investigation, and elder abuse." He said it like he was telling her the weather, and somehow that made it worse. "This is absurd," she said, clutching paperwork like a talisman. "This is official HOA business under estate proceedings authorized by..." "By who?" Special Agent Harris asked, walking in with the warrant balanced on 2 fingertips like a fine dish. "Because federal authorization is right here, Ms. Stone." Behind him, Detective Smith and 2 uniforms materialized from the garage's edges, a chorus of quiet competence. Victoria's face did a speed run of the 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, bad improv, silence. Her eyes found Rebecca, who'd stepped in with a digital recorder and the kind of steady that grows in people when fear curdles into purpose. "You," Victoria whispered like betrayal lived in the consonant. "After all, You tried to institutionalize my mother," Rebecca said, voice flat as a judge's gavel. "You leveraged fake authority to terrorize vulnerable families. I documented every word." Harris read the charges. David took the lockpick kit with a gloved hand and held it up for the camera. "Felony, possession of burglary tools," he said almost kindly, like he was apologizing for the obvious. "And you used them under color of made-up authority." She lunged more a flinch than a fight toward the workbench. 2 officers closed the gap. The cuffs clicked. It's a small sound on TV, but up close it's a ceremony and ending. She sagged, not dramatic, just deflated, like the air of power had leaked out and the husk didn't know how to stand without it. Around us, the evidence text flowed in photographs from 4 angles, bag numbers, seals pressed tight. Chain of custody forms thicker than church bulletins. Harris kept up a low commentary for the record time, location, consent, or lack thereof. David nodded to me once quick, that wordless translation of son to father. We did it right. Neighbors had collected at the edge of the driveway the way people gather for parades and fires, and the end of bullies. Phones were out. Mrs. Carter clapped once, a single pop of relief she didn't mean to make. Victoria looked up at the audience she'd curated with newsletters about property values and community standards, and she saw what she hadn't planned for no fear left to feed on. She tried one last strategy. "John, you don't understand what's in that box," she hissed. "You're protecting something that could hurt you. It wasn't a threat anymore, it was the rasp of a story collapsing. I stepped past the tape, not closer to her, closer to the workbench, to the space Maria had filled with quiet courage. "No," I said, voice steady surprise of the morning. "I'm protecting the woman who protected all of us." Harris nodded like the line landed in the record. David's eyes softened for half a heartbeat, then he guided Victoria toward the door, reciting her rights with the rhythm of a lullaby for dangerous people. Rebecca exhaled for the first time since she walked in. The red spray paint on my garage still shouted its lie. The blue letters beneath it. Check the box. MM looked almost gentle now, like advice from a friend who refuses to give up on you. The tech sealed the USB into a bag and called out the number. Item 3. Digital storage device wood box interior, recovered by witness, transferred under warrant. He pressed the seal, signed the line. Passed it to Harris, who signed, passed it to Smith, who signed. The chain looped closed tight as a ring on a finger. Clean. Admissible. Answer to a prayer I didn't know how to pray. Outside, the world sounded normal. A lawnmower 2 doors down, a dog losing its mind at a squirrel. Somewhere a kid hopped on a scooter and left rubber on the cul-de-sac. Inside my garage, the air thinned and brightened. It felt like someone had finally opened a window in a room that had been asleep too long. John Victoria said when they paused at the threshold, turning back with that old HOA tilt to her chin, a ghost of a weapon she no longer owned. "You think you've won, but you don't know how big this is." "You're right," I said. "I don't. But I know it doesn't belong to you anymore." They walked her out. The heels that had clicked power now scuffed. The faces that had nodded to her in meetings, some of them looked away, some watched, some learned. David handed her to the uniforms like a craftsman passing a finished piece along the line. Harris turned back to me, not smiling, but something like approval warming the edges. "We'll take it from here, Mr. Morgan." "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded like someone who hadn't slept and finally might. "I know." We stood there a beat longer, the 3 of us, me the box, the empty spot where terror used to live, until the siren 2 streets over burbled low and faded. David touched the workbench, a little tap I recognized from when he was 10 and wanted to say I love you without the words. I didn't say anything back, didn't need to. The cuffs had said enough. That's where it ends for me. The door frame. Full of morning, the scent of lavender still stubborn in the air, the weight of a mahogany lid settling back into place. No victory parade, no long speech. Just the sound of a warrant doing its work and a life shrinking back to its proper size. The lock on the box had opened for love. The cuffs closed for the same reason. Justice isn't loud, it's precise.